Wind moves first. Not people, not animals, just wind. It drags dust across a landscape of broken stone and dry grass. The earth is cracked, the hills are bare. Nothing grows easily here, nothing thrives. If you were a traveler in the ancient world, you wouldn't stop, you wouldn't build. You certainly wouldn't dream of a city. Because this place offers nothing. No gold, no rich soil, no protection. Just rock and heat and silence. And yet, from this silence rose a city that would one day command the entire known world. A city that would enslave millions, rewrite laws, build roads across continents, and decide the fate of kings. A city so powerful that even 2,000 years later, we still live inside its shadow. Its name was Rome. And this is the story of how the most powerful city in history was born in the last place anyone would ever choose. 3,000 years ago, this land meant nothing. To the north, the Etruscans built elegant cities. To the south, the Greeks raised marble temples beside blue seas. They had art. They had philosophy. They had beauty. Rome had mud. 7 uneven hills. A slow, muddy river called the Tiber. Summer heat that burned the skin. Winters that soaked everything in cold rain. Farming was difficult. Food was uncertain. Stone was everywhere. Comfort was nowhere. This was not a birthplace for greatness. This was a place you survived. And yet survival creates a different kind of people. Harder people. Hungrier people. People who do not expect the world to be kind. Because Rome would never be gifted wealth. Rome would have to take it. The Romans later invented a story about their birth. Because ordinary beginnings weren't enough. They wanted something darker, something legendary. 2 infants abandoned beside the river, left there to die. Romulus, Remus, too weak to crawl, too young to cry for long. Night animals circled, the cold crept in. Death should have been certain, but instead, something else came. A she-wolf. She stepped from the trees, her breath slow, her eyes glowing in the dark. She didn't attack. She lay down beside them and fed them. Milk from a predator, life from something wild. The future rulers of Rome, nursed by a beast, raised not by comfort, but by survival. When the boys grew older, they decided to build a city. But before the first wall was raised, they argued. Who would rule? Who would lead? It ended the only way Rome would ever truly understand conflict. Romulus killed his brother. Then he built the city alone and named it after himself, Rome. A city born from blood. A city that learned its first lesson immediately. Power is not given. Power is taken. Rome didn't have poets. It didn't have philosophers. It didn't have great artists. What it had were fighters. Farmers who learned to hold spears. Shepherds who learned to carry shields. Boys who learned discipline before they learned comfort. Because every neighbor was an enemy. Every border was fragile. Every year meant another war. So Rome adapted. It turned survival into training, training into routine, routine into perfection. And slowly, the Roman legion was born. Not heroes, not champions, but something far more terrifying. A system. Imagine standing in formation. Your shield touches the man beside you. You smell his sweat. You feel his breath. Your armor weighs 30 kilograms. Your feet ache. You have marched all day, and tomorrow you will march again. No one asks if you're tired. No one cares. Because in Rome, weakness is betrayal. If you break formation, you die. If you run, you die. If you fail your brothers, they kill you themselves. So nobody runs, nobody breaks, nobody fails. The legion moves as one creature. Thousands of men, one mind, an iron animal made of flesh and steel. And when that creature advances, the world moves out of its way. But Rome's greatest weapon wasn't the sword. It wasn't the shield. It wasn't even the soldiers. It was stone. Roads, straight, relentless, cutting through mountains, crossing rivers, stretching farther than the eye could see. While other armies got stuck in mud, Rome marched. While others took months, Rome arrived in weeks. Rebellion anywhere in the empire meant only one thing: the legions were already on their way. There was no escape. Because Rome didn't just conquer land, it connected it. And once Rome connected you, you belonged to Rome forever. Then the wealth began to flow. Gold from Spain, grain from Egypt, wine from Gaul, silk from the east, slaves from everywhere. Everything moved toward one place, Rome. The city swelled like a living thing. 50,000 people, then 200,000, then 500,000, until finally, over 1 million souls lived inside these walls. No city on earth had ever reached that number, not for another 1,000 years. This wasn't the city anymore. This was the center of the world. The streets roared with voices, merchants shouting, metal clanging, children running, dozens of languages mixing together. Greek, Latin, Egyptian, Syrian, African, Spanish. The entire known world compressed in the stone and marble. Fresh water poured through aqueducts from distant mountains. Bathhouses larger than palaces welcomed thousands daily. Floors were heated from below. Sewers ran beneath the streets. Apartment buildings rose 6 stories high. While most of humanity still lived in mud huts, Rome felt like the future. Impossible, unnatural, too advanced for its time. It wasn't just powerful, it was modern. 2,000 years too early, and at the center of it all stood monuments that whispered a single message to the world. You are small. Rome is eternal. At dawn, the city was already awake, not for work, not for prayer, but for blood. Tens of thousands moved through the streets toward a single monument of stone. Vendors shouted, children laughed, wine spilled onto the pavement. It felt like a festival, like a holiday, but what they came to see was death. The Colosseum rose above the city like a mountain of marble, 50,000 seats, layer upon layer of arches, so large it seemed impossible that human hands had built it. Inside, the sand was fresh, smooth, waiting. Below the arena floor, hidden in darkness, men prayed. Some whispered to gods they barely believed in. Some kissed small tokens from home. Some simply stared at the ground. Because in a few minutes, they would walk into the light, and most of them would never come back. The gates opened. A roar exploded from the crowd. Gladiators stepped forward, armor glinting, breath shaking. They weren't heroes, they weren't volunteers, they were slaves, prisoners, property, and today they were entertainment. Steel struck steel, shields splintered, sand turned red, and the crowd cheered. 50,000 voices screaming for more blood, more death, more spectacle, because Rome had conquered the world. And when you conquer everything, you get bored. And when you get bored, cruelty becomes fun. But the Colosseum wasn't Rome, not entirely. Rome was something stranger, more complicated, because while some citizens watched men die for sport, others simply tried to survive another day. At sunrise, bakers filled the streets with the smell of warm bread. Market stalls overflowed with olives, fish, fruit, spices from lands most people would never see. Laundry hung from windows. Dogs barked. Children chased each other between carts. Life moved fast. Too fast. In the rich districts, marble villas stood behind painted walls. Fountains trickled. Servants hurried silently through shaded gardens. Wine cooled in silver bowls. Food arrived without effort. Bathhouses offered steam, massage, conversation. The wealthy barely touched the ground with their own feet. But just a few streets away, the poor lived stacked on top of each other in wooden apartment blocks. 6 floors high, crowded, hot, dangerous. One spark could burn everything. One collapse could kill hundreds. Entire families slept in a single room. Bread was thin, water was dirty, and every day felt uncertain. Rome wasn't one city. It was 2 worlds sharing the same walls. One drowning in luxury, the other drowning in struggle. And the distance between them grew wider each year. For centuries, Rome had called itself a republic. No kings, no tyrants, power shared between elected officials. The Senate debated laws, citizens voted. At least, that was the idea. But power has weight, and eventually it crushes whatever tries to balance it. As Rome grew richer, politics grew dirtier. Votes were bought, promises were broken. Generals loyal to money instead of the state. Senators loyal to themselves instead of Rome. Corruption spread quietly, like rot inside wood. From the outside, the republic still looked strong, but inside, it was hollow, and hollow things collapsed suddenly. Then came a man who would change everything. Gaius Julius Caesar. Brilliant, ambitious, dangerously charismatic. His soldiers didn't just obey him, they loved him. Because Caesar marched with them, bled with them, ate the same food, slept on the same ground. When he spoke, men followed, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. He conquered Gaul, expanded Rome's borders farther than anyone thought possible, returned with gold, glory, an army completely loyal to him alone. And that terrified the Senate, because Rome feared one thing above all else: a king. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his army, it wasn't just a military act, it was a declaration. Civil war. Roman against Roman. Brother against brother. The republic tearing itself apart. In the end, Caesar won. He stood alone, dictator for life, the most powerful man in the world. But power creates enemies, and enemies wait patiently. On the Ides of March, inside the Senate, daggers flashed. 23 wounds. Friends among the attackers. Even the man he trusted most, Brutus. Caesar fell at the foot of Pompey's statue, bleeding onto the stone. The Republic had killed its savior, or perhaps its future emperor. Because after Caesar, Rome would never pretend to be a republic again. From the chaos rose a quieter man, Octavian, later known as Augustus. He learned from Caesar's mistake. He didn't call himself king. He didn't call himself dictator. He called himself first citizen. But everyone knew the truth. Rome now had an emperor. And strangely, it worked. Under Augustus, the wars slowed, trade flourished, cities expanded, temples rose, art returned. For nearly 200 years, Rome experienced something rare: peace, the Pax Romana. Roads stretched farther than ever. Ships filled the Mediterranean. Money flowed like water. For a moment, it felt like Rome had beaten history itself, like this empire might actually last forever. And that illusion was the most dangerous moment of all. Because nothing lasts forever. Not empires, not cities, not power. Wealth created laziness. Slaves replaced workers. Citizens stopped fighting. Bread was given for free. Games distracted the masses. Bread and circuses. Feed them, entertain them, keep them quiet. And slowly, Rome forgot the thing that built it: hardship, discipline, hunger. The next generations weren't forged in war. They were raised in comfort, and comfort softens even the strongest civilizations. Emperors grew corrupt, some insane, some cruel, some completely indifferent. The throne changed hands through poison, through murder, through betrayal. The legions that once conquered the world began fighting each other instead. And far beyond the borders, new enemies watched, waiting, patient, because every empire looks eternal right before it falls. And Rome had begun to crack. Empires rarely collapse in a single day. They don't explode, they don't shatter like glass. They rot, slowly, quietly, from the inside. At first, nobody notices. The market's still open, the streets are still full, the baths still steam with laughter. Rome still looks eternal. But underneath, something is failing. The gold is disappearing. Too many wars, too many palaces, too many emperors demanding monuments to themselves. Taxes rise. then rise again. Farmers abandon their land because they cannot pay. Merchants hide their wealth. Trade slows. Coins grow thinner, mixed with cheaper metals. Money itself becomes a lie. Prices double, then triple. A loaf of bread that once cost 1 coin now costs 10, then 20. People stop trusting the currency, stop trusting the government, stop trusting Rome. And when people stop believing in an empire, that empire is already dying. Then came the emperors, not leaders, not guardians, but men drunk on absolute power. Because Rome had created something dangerous, one throne, one man, unlimited control. And unlimited power does strange things to the human mind. One emperor declared himself a god. Another executed senators for sport. Another bankrupted the empire to build a palace covered in gold. Some ruled for years, some ruled for months, some ruled for days. Many were poisoned, strangled, stabbed by their own guards. The throne became cursed, a seat no sane man could survive. In just 50 years, Rome had over 20 emperors. Imagine that, 20 different rulers, 20 different visions, 20 different disasters. Stability vanished. The empire no longer moved forward, it staggered. Like a giant losing blood with every step. Once, the Roman legion had been unstoppable, disciplined, precise, proud. Now, it was tired. Citizens no longer wanted to serve. Why march for years when bread was free at home? Why die for Rome when Rome no longer cared about you? So the empire did something unthinkable. It hired foreigners, mercenaries, barbarians, the very people they once fought. Men who had no loyalty, no history, no reason to protect Rome beyond a paycheck. The legions stopped being Roman. They became temporary, fragile, and when danger came, fragile things break. Beyond the borders, they had been watching, for centuries, the Goths, the Vandals, the Huns. Tribes Rome once dismissed as primitive, savages, barbarians. But barbarians learn, and they notice something. Rome wasn't strong anymore. Its borders were thin, its armies divided, its cities soft, so they pushed. Not all at once, little by little, raids, skirmishes, settlements, testing, probing, like wolves circling an old lion, waiting for it to slow down, waiting for it to fall. And one winter, the borders broke, not because Rome lost a battle, but because Rome no longer had the strength to fight one. For 800 years, no enemy had touched Rome. 8 centuries of safety, 8 centuries of arrogance, the eternal city, untouchable, unbreakable. Until 410 AD, the Goths reached the gates, and this time, no great legion appeared. No massive army marched to save them. There was only silence. The gates opened, and the unthinkable happened. Rome fell. Barbarians flooded the streets. Fires climbed into the sky. Temples were looted, homes destroyed, statues shattered, families dragged away screaming, gold ripped from altars, blood soaking stones that had stood for centuries. The greatest city on earth, begging for mercy. No one came. For 3 days, Rome burned, and when the smoke cleared, the myth was gone. The eternal city was just another city after all. Morning arrived quietly. Too quietly. No markets, no shouting merchants, no marching soldiers, no laughter, just wind, blowing through empty streets. Doors broken, columns cracked, ash falling like snow, dogs searching through ruins. The Forum abandoned, the baths cold, the Colosseum silent. A city that once held 1 million souls now felt like a graveyard. And somewhere in the distance, a statue of Caesar lay face down in the dirt, as if history itself had fallen. In 476 AD, a boy sat on the imperial throne, Romulus Augustulus, a child emperor, the last emperor. No armies, no glory, no power, just a title that meant nothing anymore. A barbarian general walked into the palace, took the crown, and told him to go home. No battle, no drama, just the end. The Roman Empire simply stopped, like a candle running out of wax. After all the wars, all the blood, all the centuries, it didn't explode, it faded. But here's the strange thing. Rome didn't really die. Not completely. Because look around you. The laws you follow, the roads you drive, the buildings you enter, the words you speak. Senate, republic, justice, citizen, all Roman. Even now, 2,000 years later, we still live inside their ideas, their mistakes, their dreams. Rome collapsed, but its shadow never disappeared. Maybe that's what true power really is. Not how long you rule, but how long you are remembered. From stone and dust, they built a city. From nothing, they built an empire. And even in ruin, Rome still whispers, "We were here. We changed the world. And you are still walking in our footsteps."